Hi, friends. This is Will Parker back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for another Principal Matters episode. Jen, this week, our guest is going to be a good friend, a former guest on our show, Kurtis Hewson, who's come out with a new book, he and his wife. And I can't wait for you to hear this conversation. But before we do, we start with our Q&A. And here this week, this came actually from a coaching session I had with a new principal who has spent years as an AP, who said, I have set my calendar for what I believe are my most important priorities. But how do I prepare for the unknowns, those responsibilities or expectations I won't even be aware of until they happen for the first time? And I thought that's such a great question. So, Jen, what would you tell a leader who feels like they're ready, but how do you prepare them to be ready for what they don't know to be ready for?
Right. Well, I'm sure this listener is ready after years as an AP. But, I think the answer lies in the question here. This listener asked, how do I prepare for the unknowns? Well, the fact that you know that there's unknowns is great because there is a lot that you can't possibly prepare for. I was just telling someone today, this is a reactive job. A lot of what you do is a reaction to things that, decisions, choices, situations that other people find themselves in. And so you almost have to leave room for those unknowns and don't overschedule your calendar to not leave room for those.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. Because I had two thoughts. One of them was take a look at your calendar. And if you realize you've overcommitted, start asking who else on my team could help me share these responsibilities because maybe I've overcommitted. That was my tendency as in my first year from AP to principal. I thought, well, I'm really good at discipline. I'll help. And people would still come to me as the first person instead of heading to an AP before they came to me. And so I realized at the end of that first year, man, I had so many new responsibilities that I struggled to get done because I was still doing a lot of my old ones.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing I'll say to a leader is, in addition to sharing more with others, is this looks different from place to place. I know not everybody could do this, but do you have access to the calendar of the principal before you? Because if you do, you're going to see some things in there that you're going to be like, oh, I didn't even know that
Was a thing.
And so if you can have access to someone's previous calendar, and I've done that probably in every position I've ever taken, even teaching, show me last year's syllabus for this, or show me that last year's AP's calendar, or show me that principal from the before me's calendar, or even when I became an executive director at the state level, I'm always looking for the model of who did this before me as a way to just kind of be looking ahead. So I would suggest that too, Jen.
That's great advice. I had never thought of it as such a deliberate thing. It always feels a little sneaky to look at somebody else's year, but wow, it's not sneaky. It's wise and honestly helps eliminate surprises. So that's great advice.
Well, and the advantage of that, and I'll give kudos to a good friend of mine who's a longtime veteran principal, was a state principal of the year, David Byler from Jinx High School here in Oklahoma. And David, I've heard him present to a lot of new leaders, and he'll say, for him, digital stuff's great, but he actually created a physical folder for every month of the calendar year. And as things happened that first year, he would just print off reminders and put them in the folder for like, oh, this is a report that I didn't know I did in January. I'm going to put it in my January folder. This time next year, I have the sample ready. And he said by the end of year one, he had a pretty good catalog of all the things he had done that year with, archived records, but also something to grab for the next year with samples ready to go. So I thought that was helpful.
And you could share that with your administrative assistant and say, make sure I check this.
There you go. There you go. Oh, yeah, I guess we should add that too. Yes. If you have an administrative assistant, lean in. I would definitely have a scheduled time with them too, especially if they've served before with the leader before you. If they're as new as you are, you still need to have a scheduled time with them so you can compare notes. Exactly. Well, Jen, before we switch over to our guest speaker for the week, we'll be releasing this at the end of August, and you and I are recording at the end of August. So welcome back to a new school year. But I know in addition to the work that you do at Dublin City Schools, you're also writing, and your newsletter is doing really, really well. How can people stay connected with you? And you've topped 1,000 subscribers for that new newsletter. So why don't you tell people how they can find your content?
Absolutely. The easiest way is probably to go to my website, jenschwanke.com, and click on newsletter and subscribe there. And you can always scroll down to see all the previous episodes and editions too. So yeah, find me there, jenschwanke.com.
Well, and you can find all of today's resources at my website at williamdparker.com or at principalmatterspodcast.com. And Jen, I'll just say this too, since I don't always know what I'm going to share in each of these times, but I just want to say thank you to some groups that have had me recently in their states. I was just in Cleveland, Ohio, with a combined group of 3 charter schools that had me there. So a big thank you to Deb Mays, who invited me out. And then a big thank you to Global Village Academy in Parma, Ohio. It's a wonderful, beautiful community. I may write about them later just because they have a wonderful heritage of Ukrainian families that moved there in World War II and are now serving Ukrainian families that have come from the more recent conflicts. And in a couple of days from this recording, I'll be in outside the Chicago area with the Diocese of Joliet with Catholic school pre-K-12 principals. So thank you, friends, for the opportunities to reconnect. Jen, one other thing before we go, because I know I'm making this transition really long, but you have a memoir coming out, and I don't want to let you off the hook. That I think is it published yet?
No, pre-order is out there, but it won't be until February of 27. So advanced reader copies are out there now, and yeah, it's wild. It's going to be a whole different path for me. So send positive vibes.
Well, I love cheering on everything that you publish, so I can't wait for that one to be live. So Principal Matters listeners, thank you for tuning in this week, and we know you're going to love this conversation with Kurtis Hewson. Until next time, thanks for doing what matters. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Over 1 million teachers use iExcel in their classrooms every day for one reason. They love it. Why? iExcel is where the magic happens. With just one platform, teachers can personalize learning for every student. iExcel gives teachers all the tools they need to enhance and differentiate instruction without adding work to their plates. Plus, iExcel has decades of expertise and has proven to be effective. Studies on more than 70,000 schools across nearly 50 states show that those who use iExcel outperform others on state tests. Ready to bring the magic to your school? Visit iexcel.com/PM to learn more.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Principal Matters Podcast, episode 515. Hi, friends. It's Will Parker back with another show of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. And this week I'm sitting with a great friend, Kurtis Hewson, who's a return guest. Kurtis, it was August 24th of 2024 when you were on my show the first time, and this one's going to be coming out almost exactly 2 years later, August 26, because we're going to be talking about your new book. So this week we're talking about collaborative team meetings with my award-winning educator, former teacher administrator, respected secondary instructor, co-founder of Jigsaw Learning, where he works with principals in schools and teachers across North America. He is known for his practical systems level approaches. He supports thousands of educators along with his wonderful wife, Laura Hewson, and they are the co-authors of their new book, Collaborative Team Meetings, The Peace Connecting PLCs and MTSS, coming to me from, are you in Alberta?
Yeah, Alberta, Canada.
Coming to me from Alberta, Canada, where today we're recording this in the spring, Kurtis. People are going to be listening to it in August. So you've had a day of rain. I've had a day of sunshine. But welcome back. Why don't you fill in the gaps on that intro and tell listeners something else they may be surprised to know since the last time they've met you?
Will, always a pleasure to be able to join you for a conversation. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while now. Yeah, the intro caught it all, my friend. Former administrator, and it was through interactions in my last school where we were really trying to leverage the incredible capacity that we had across our school, the centuries of teaching experience that were there, and how could we bring it together, empower those that are closest to the kids, and really move forward our collaborative efforts. Well, that was almost 20 years ago, and it's morphed and evolved into this collaborative response work that, as you mentioned, my wife Lorna and I now do with thousands of schools across North America and beyond. It's exciting work. I love getting the chance to talk about it and to be learning with those schools and districts that are engaging in the work. I take away something every time from those engagements, which has, kept me going as a learner as well.
Well, I'm so excited to jump into this content, Kurtis. And so let me set the stage. Two things. One, we'll pull back the curtain for listeners. This is the third time Kurtis and I have tried to connect to record the session together. And the last two times we've had technical craziness that's happened. And so we've been dropped and we've been on phones and we've been on with Riverside and Zoom. And so we're like, dude, we're going to make this happen. This is it. This is going to happen. So thank you, Kurtis, for your patience as we've rescheduled this several days.
Absolutely, Will. And I'm knocking on wood right now that we didn't jinx it with that. This one is going to work out, my friend.
Yeah. Thing number two, and by the way, this is a record in the history of Principal Matters for the number of times we're going to try. The second thing I wanted to say before we get started is because we've talked in other settings so much about your upcoming book, I just want to say to leaders, a lot of people are stepping back into school in this time of August or getting ready to gear up for the return of a new school year. And you may be thinking like, okay, can my brain really go there right now of digging into collaborative team meetings, connecting that PLC work with MTSS work? That sounds like hard thinking right now. And I just want to assure you listeners, one of the things, Kurtis, that I think you have a superpower in is leading teams. And so I just wanted you to begin. You have spent years helping schools implement what you call collaborative response. Mm-hmm. What problems have you been seeing, though, in team meetings that led you and Lorna to focus an entire book on bridging this gap between PLCs and MTSS?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it was many, many, many years ago that I had the great fortune of listening to Richard Dufour, the guru of professional learning communities. And he talked back then, and if anyone wants to go check out a great video, search Group versus Team with Richard Dufour. He talks about the difference between working in groups and teams, and that in schools all across North America and beyond, we've settled into working as groups, collegial groups, congenial groups, groups that enjoy one another, like working together, share, help, support. I think we would have said in our own school, we were really collaborative until we understood what collaborative really means. Mm-hmm. And I think when we are being collaborative, I often like to say it's being able to be comfortable being uncomfortable and realizing that in a collaborative conversation, I'm going to have my assumptions challenged. I'm going to have people asking me about strategies that work and, more importantly, what doesn't, and what have I learned through that process. I'm going to pull back the curtain on my instructional practices and be assured that I'm going to grow through that process. I think when we are truly being collaborative, we understand that we need levels of trust, levels of safety that don't happen by accident. And when we create the conditions for that to happen, oh my goodness, a team can accomplish so much more than just a group of dedicated individuals. But setting the space for that team is critically important. I think that's been our key understanding, is how do we establish conditions that really ensure we're working as a team? Because without those structures and processes in place, we may be seeing positive outcomes for students and helping to support our colleagues. But oh my goodness, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire, Will, when we can move from grouping to teaming. And I think that's been critically important for us within this work.
Yeah. So let me just speak to the elephant in the room among leaders, because sometimes I see, especially social media, pushback against all kinds of things that have become easy targets for people to say, like, oh, we don't do PLCs anymore, or MTSS is not necessary at my school. And I just want to say this out loud, that you're right. If you're simply following a program, stepping into some kind of initiative just because it's research-based or because it's required by your district, that doesn't equal meaningful outcomes.
Yes.
And so the more important question I want to ask you is what you just touched on, Kurtis. What are you doing with the other people, the other adults in your building, to build the kind of collaboration where you can say, whatever you call it, we're a team, not a group.
Yeah,
Team,
and
not a
I
group.
think this is one of the critical things, Will, that I think we have to step back from trying to follow the regimented program. And I'll be the first one to say we did not refer to anything in our building as PLCs because it brought with it baggage, even though the foundational components of that work were in place. So I want people to first cast aside the idea that we have to have a PLC that looks like this or an MTSS structure that looks like this. And I think what's more important is how do we create aligned systems? We talk about 4 layers of team within our schools, and the collaborative team meeting being one of those 4 layers that are critically important. But when I work with schools, we often say these are categories that you may refer to them something different within your own school, but there's a through line that is so critically important. So I think we have to get out of the mindset of, well, PLCs don't work, MTSS doesn't work, and get back to, but what are the fundamental principles that we're trying to endeavor through those structure or through those different frameworks, and really capture that when we can clearly identify what are the different teaming structures and systems that we have, clarify with real clear intentionality and purpose within our school, and then recognize that it's through these layering of teams that we're not only responding to the needs of students, but we're building collaborative capacity as we go. More importantly, we're building habits and cultures, ways that we think and engage, which I think is the most critical component. I often say to a school, when I hear them say, we've been doing CRM, and what they're trying to say is collaborative response model for a number of years, I usually try and say, let's back up a little bit and think about it more as a way of being, of how do we collaboratively respond to our students. When we get trapped into the acronyms, I think we lose some of the true intent that's intended in that work.
No, well said. Now, let me speak directly to a Principal Matters listener, because someone right now may be listening to this conversation thinking about all of the spinning plates that are happening as they're stepping into a new school year, their responsibilities to try to invite people to this attitude and posture, but also practice of being a team.
Mm-hmm.
And so take us to school for a few minutes, Kurtis, because if I'm a listener, and if I had to have a checklist of the most important things Kurtis recognizes must be present for a team, for a group of people to work as a team, what should I be looking for?
Okay, I'm going to come at this from 2 approaches, one from a macro level and then from a micro level. From a macro level, I think we have to look at what are 4 layers of collaboration that we want to see in each and every school. And Will, I don't care if your school has 5 staff members in the building or 155. These 4 layers apply. And I'm going to just walk through these really quickly with you. And I know you're going to be able to say, yeah, check, we have that layer covered in our school. And I'm going to go from most intensive to least intensive, or sorry, a better way to say that is most individual student focused to more group of or cohort of student focus. So
Okay.
our 4th layer, and in time these start to connect to tiers of support, and if we have time I can get to that. If not, please, anyone listening, go check out jigsawlearning.ca. You are going to find all the resources to help you understand this. So this 4th layer we call case consult, and it's the easiest layer to identify because every school has meetings like this. These are meetings where we come together to focus on one student. One student's on the agenda, or maybe one family is on the agenda, and we're bringing the necessary people around to determine what do we need to do. Often these meetings are the result of crisis or complexity for students, but one student on the agenda. And again, I know a number of schools that will be able to say, we have multiple meeting structures that look like that. Great. We can't, we don't want to eliminate that layer. It's an important layer, but If everything in your school is a one student at a time conversation, highly inefficient. It's not a way to run a school. So we come back one more layer and get to what I call the school support team layer, or what we reference as the school support team layer in our collaborative response work. This is the layer of team that is looking at what are the supports we're putting in place in addition to or beyond the classroom before we ever get to the let's talk about one student. But who are the students oftentimes that are being referred for additional supports? This is that connection to multi-tiered systems of support or earlier response to intervention, being able to say, even after we've engaged in good universal instruction, there are students who need more. And what's the team that's determining what should we do? Oftentimes, this team may be thinking about how do we support the student. They may also be talking about how do we support the teacher. Is there more PD that we need to look at based on different referrals that are coming in? Again, schools that have multi-tiered systems of support, this is usually a team that's involving some of their special education personnel or their inclusive team members, often administrators involved in that conversation of, okay, who needs support beyond the classroom? So now I'm going to slip down to our first layer. I'm going to skip the second, and I'll come back to it. The first layer is where PLCs live. I often, when a school says, we're doing PLCs, are you saying that we should stop and do collaborative response? We're saying, no. Your PLC structures exist in a layer we refer to as collaborative planning. Now, it's intentional, Will, that we referred to this as collaborative planning, not PLC, because not only because some of the baggage that came with those three little letters being put together. And I remember hearing Richard Dufour say the acronym has come on to take on meanings in a lot of organizations that it was never intended to be. Three people come into a room and we say we're a PLC. Not really. This collaborative planning layer is meant to be, what are we doing to focus on the needs of all of our learners? Oftentimes we're breaking down curriculum, we're looking at assessment data, we're determining, are there trends, are there instructional gaps that we're seeing? How could we attend to those gaps? Within our own school, we had all of these three layers before we even understood what we meant by layering, but something was missing. It was too easy for a teacher to be able to be struggling with a student, even though we've engaged in our PLC work, and let's use a really simple example. We're building out some common assessments around writing instruction that we're utilizing. We're looking at student work. We're identifying where there are gaps or trends that we need to address. But what could be the bridge between the PLC or collaborative planning before it ever gets up to the referral stage? And this is where that magic of the collaborative team meeting came into place, where I could come into a room with my colleagues and say, I have a student who's struggling with X, and we put the attention on X, or what we call the key issue, and not the student. And we say, all right, for that challenge, who else is seeing that? And what could we do for that particular key issue? And I can break this meeting structure down for you and your listeners, if you like, Will, in a little bit. It's a really powerful structure, but it's intended to be that bridge. Again, the title of the upcoming book is The Missing Piece. Whenever schools hear of this meeting structure, they get really, really excited. We often hear oh my goodness, this is what we were missing to ensure that not every teacher who has a struggle with a student is referring it to somebody else, that we're trying to build up that capacity. So that's macro.
So what I heard you saying is that before we even talk about the essential ingredients necessary for a collaborative team to work as effectively as it can, that bridge between PLCs and MTSS, you have to recognize that 4 layers of support exist in any well-functioning school, which include, you do have teams meeting together to look at standards and focuses on all learners and what do we need to be doing collaboratively to work together.
You got it.
We do need to have school support teams that can pull together and figure out what additional layers of help need to happen from different players on the team, whether that's specialists or instruction or counseling, in order to meet a kid and support a kid where they need to grow. We need to have one-on-ones so that we have case meetings where students or their families are being given specific solutions and feedback and tailored support.
And often in those conversations, we might be engaging external agencies by that point, or
yes,
supports beyond our school.
But in addition to all those pieces, the thing that you see, and this is why you guys wrote the book, the layer that you see that's often missing is the power of that collaborative team meeting. And I'm going to name them in order. Before the PLC moves up to that school support team, that collaborative team needs to be number 2.
Yes.
PLCs is 1, collaborative teams are 2, school support teams are 3, and then that case consult, that one-on-one is 4. And they don't always happen within sequence, but that's a way to look at it. But now the question is, if the power of a collaborative team is the ability to focus on X, the challenge that when we pull together, not who's the student, but what's the instructional challenge that I'm facing right now that we together can begin to really focus in on to find some solutions, it's going to influence all those other layers. So this is where we get micro, which is, okay, that's the big picture. Now the small picture is, how do we do that? How do I really pull a team together so that they're having more meaningful collaborative conversations? And this is where I want to do the checklist. Like, what needs to be present for that to be a productive and effective collaboration?
One of the things that we talk about in this collaborative response work is that we will reduce the number of meetings by adding one more. And again, mathematically, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But what we're trying to do is, through this collaborative team meeting structure, adding it in to happen every 3 to 5 weeks. So think monthly, as a regular cadence, that by adding it in, we're going to boost everyone's collaborative capacity so that in time, less and less students are getting referred for that school support team or that case consult. And the ones that do are the ones that absolutely need to have that conversation happening. So this collaborative team meeting becomes the juice within this. So let me break down what this looks like. So, Will, imagine that you and I and 3 other teaching colleagues come together into this meeting, and usually it's a 40 to 60 minute meeting structure that we see. In this, we have some of our specialist colleagues that are there to support. We probably have an administrator that's, if not present, likely facilitating the conversation. And we've been asked to come ready. Now, one of the beauties of this is these do not have to be the same colleagues that are meeting in collaborative planning, i.e. PLCs. It could be, I've worked with a number of high schools where they meet in their department or subject area teams, because that makes sense for looking at their standards or similarities in what they're teaching. But when we come to the collaborative team meeting, now we're cross-disciplinary, because this is what it looks like. We start off by first reviewing our team norms. Let's pick one that we'll practice. And then a facilitator is going to turn to you, Will, and say, all right, we are going to take 10 minutes as a team and look at student celebrations. Will, who's a student you've brought today, and what's a celebration that you're seeing for them, or a success? And through this conversation, we're going to surface the most important question, that is, what do you think you did that led to that success? Now, this is really key, to take the time to celebrate for the different teachers to be able to say, I'm seeing this success for Ellen, and I think what I did that led to that success was X. This is building up incredibly high levels of collective efficacy for us as a team to be able to identify the things we're doing that's leading to success. The beauty of this is when you state that for this student, putting a visual schedule up at the front of the classroom to help with transitions, as well as having personal check-ins, and here's how I do it in my room. Someone else in the room might be going, ooh, that's a great idea. That's gold. And you might be saying, well, doesn't everybody do that? Nope. No, they don't. They not the same way that you do. And it can surface ideas and strategies. So we take the first 10 minutes for that, and then we get into the magic. And it looks like this. Will, I know you've brought a student today. And in time, we start to connect it to our data and evidence so that our data is starting to flag who we should be paying attention to. And we say, we know you brought a student. Don't say their name yet, please. What's a key issue? that you're experiencing right now. And you indicate, and in time, as teachers, we get better at being succinct in naming that key issue. So let's say that you've said right now, my key issue is on-task stamina. Now, someone might have to ask you, what do you mean by that? And when you say, I have a student that cannot take more than 30 seconds on a task before they get distracted or before they're off task again, really low levels of stamina when working independently. So we say, all right, low levels of stamina for independent work. There's our key issue. Kurtis and everyone else in the room, write down the name of a student where you're also seeing that for. Don't say it out loud, just write it down. And what we're trying to do is reassure Will that you're not the only one. All of us have that. And there may be a person who says, I don't have a student like that right now. That's okay. We still need your voice for the next part, because now we're going to ask, what could we do? And it's important in this part of the conversation that we just, I like connecting it almost like we're going to throw instructional spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. And so I'll say, one of the things I use is I have visual timers up in the class, and I say for the next 2 minutes, we're going to do X. And someone else will jump in and say, I often chunk my my task just like that to say step 1, step 2, step 3. Someone else jumps in and says, I actually get the kids to identify, what do you think is the first step? And we co-create the steps. And then someone else says, I always make sure that if I'm having a student with trouble, I go to them first and make sure they know what are the steps they're going to take. Someone else says, I've found putting sand timers on a table being a really good help for a student. Now, it's important in this that nobody is saying, oh, that wouldn't work in this situation. We're just opening up our toolboxes, because then we want to come back and say, all right, Will, for the student that you were thinking, can you give us their name, just the name, no story, and what's one thing that you're willing to try from this conversation for them? And then we turn and say, Kurtis, for this issue, did you have a student? And if so, give us the name, just the name, no story. And what's one thing you're willing to try? We're trying to induce a solutions-focused, action-oriented mindset within our teams that we're going to walk away with things that we're willing to try within the classroom. And I often say a powerful collaborative team meeting is when I can walk out of there with 1, 2, maybe 3 new things to add to my toolbox that weren't there before I came, or that are reminders of, oh yeah, I used to do that. I'm not sure why I stopped doing this. It's really trying to leverage the things we could try so that in time, before I go and refer this student up to that next layer, I've got some ideas from my colleagues of things to try. And what we see, Will, and this is the really amazing thing that impacts culture over time, is we start to see teachers start to stretch in risk-taking in this, to be able to say, I like Will's idea, but I'm not quite sure how to do that. And at that point, if I'm an administrator in the room, I am jumping in to say, I'll cover your kids tomorrow so that you can go over during Will's prep time. And Will, would you be willing to show how you've used that checklist in your classroom? Or could this person come and observe? We're trying to just build up everyone's collective capacity through that conversation by focusing on the issue rather than the student. This is how we accomplish it, because I know you've been in those meetings where if I come in and say, I have Darcy, and here's all the things going wrong, it can go down a rabbit hole. People can start suggesting ideas, and it allows me the chance to say, oh, that wouldn't work for Darcy, or, oh, I've tried that. Oh, let me tell you more about Darcy to understand this better. By shifting to the key issue, it unlocks solutions-focused thinking.
Wow. Okay, Kurtis.
Yeah, that was a lot, my friend.
No, but Principal Matters listeners, you're going to want to get a copy of the book. But let me just do what Will loves to do is a quick summary of thoughts that I'm having as Kurtis has been unpacking what a strong collaborative team meeting looks like. And I'll just say this on the front end. It reminds me of what I've been trying to do with leadership masterminds for a long time. Yeah. You're asking teams to do for instructional outcomes. And so instead of coming, as one of my good friends likes to say, and admiring the problem an entire meeting, it's tailoring the meeting and facilitating it in a way where you find solutions. So quick summary, if you want a checklist, Principal Matters listeners, ask yourself these questions. 1, when I pull teachers and myself or specialists together to collaborate around solutions for better classroom instruction or student learning? One, have we set team norms that we can review at the very beginning to make sure that we are staying true to those norms? Two, are we allowing some time at the very beginning to celebrate successes with the focus of three, what did you do that led to that success you just celebrated? Because then I'm focusing on instruction again, not people. Four, what is a key issue? Let's put somebody in the hot seat. And what is the key issue that you're facing right now without naming the student? Talk about the issue. Five, what can we do or experiment with or try here together? What can we talk about that might help the person who just shared this issue to consider a solution they haven't considered before?
Mm-hmm.
And six, person who just shared that issue, what's one thing from all that feedback that you can walk away with and try now that you haven't tried before?
Yeah. Well, I'll just add one small caveat.
Please.
Once that person, and I loved how you said is in the hot seat, we want to try and get them out of the hot seat by asking, all right, here's our key issue. Who else is experiencing that? Write down the name of a student, because we want this to be, this isn't about Will's instruction. It's about a challenge that several of us are experiencing right now. And then when we come back to say, what's one thing you're willing to try? Will, we're also going to turn to another person and say, Kurtis, from this conversation, what's one thing that you want to try, and who's the student that you're seeing this happening?
All right, Dr. Hewson. So I'm going to bring you back now to this next question that I'm going to ask, and I'm probably going to get off script because I'm trying to think about this question from the lens of the person listening, which is, thank you for describing for me a version of collaborative team meetings that can lead to stronger outcomes. But I want to put you in the hot seat, Kurtis, which is, why does this work? Because you have sat through, I'm going to say probably hundreds of team meetings with schools all over North America. Why have you taken so much time to put a book together to describe this series of processes? Why does this work? And why do you think this is the juice of all those layers of collaborative support that teams really need to understand?
Okay, so I think the reason this works is because we're putting the power back into those closest to the child. We're saying, we know you are doing good things. We're going to name them out loud. And being able to share, and no one in this room is saying, Will, you should. But we're saying, Will, here's some ideas. What do you think would work best in this situation? It's putting all of the power closest to the people that are interacting with the student. And I think this is really, really powerful. But the other thing it does is it creates ways of thinking and vocalizing concerns that we're having. And where I see the real power come is not necessarily in the formalized 40 to 60-minute team meeting, but what happens in the hallways after, what happens in the staff room, the way people start to talk and think, and being able to say, man, I'm having this challenge. And instead of me, I love what you said, admiring the problem and telling you all about this or venting or whatnot, it's, I'm having this challenge, but I know you have some strategies. What do you suggest I could do? The way of thinking about how we collaboratively respond to students starts to change for us. And that's where I see the real power that happens in this, Will, is it's being able to focus back in on our locus of control rather than all the things out of our locus of control, which can be really defeating sometimes in this profession. We're turning back and saying, but what could you try? And again, I think that's one of the keys in the collaborative team meeting is nobody is saying that we've come up with answers to problems. We've come up with possible solutions to explore. And then let's commit to try something. And through that try, I might try a strategy that doesn't work, but it will inform my next step. I may find the perfect way that doesn't work, which leads me to I found something that did as a result. I think this is what's so critically important for this work.
So, Principal Matters listeners, if you want a strategy that gives the power back to the person closest to the student who can actually make the meaningful change necessary for that student to learn, then understanding the skills of a collaborative team meeting is it's like coaching, Kurtis. If I'm watching sports and I'm trying to figure out how is that coach able to produce those outcomes with those players, it's usually because he understands the fundamentals of, or she, of running the kinds of plays and conditionings and practices and systems to get them to that outcome.
Yeah.
And of course, they want the talent that would match all those systems too. When it comes to the outcomes we want to reach with student learning, we could send everybody back to the rooms and say, just do it. Just teach what you do the best you can and hope for the best outcomes. But what you're saying is you can do that. But if you want to see meaningful change, learn how to facilitate the kinds of collaborative team meetings that will hone in on the thing that that person needs to then try and leverage with that student for the outcome that they are hoping can be a meaningful outcome, but is better than just throwing caution to the wind and hoping for the best outcome. So let me stay really practical because I'm watching the clock. I know that two things. I want any listener to reach out and get your book, and we'll share your contact information in just a little bit. But I also want for that overwhelmed leader who's listening today, who knows their team meetings just aren't where they're supposed to be, Kurtis, what's one practical step, or what's a resource they could reach out to you and grab that just helps them take their next best step in building a collaborative team model?
So the first thing with that, Will, is I would suggest for anyone listening to go to collaborativeteammeeting.com. That's collaborativeteammeeting.com. If you go there, we have a starter kit that gives you tools, resources, even a script that you can utilize, because just like good coaching, we might need a step-by-step script to start to understand. So all that is there for that leader that is just, I don't know where to start, where to begin, how to schedule. I'd suggest one thing to walk away from, and I don't care what meeting you're in, start your meetings with celebrations. Start them with celebrations as a simple starter step. And the most important question that you can ask is, what do you think you did or we did that led to that success that we're seeing? That small little shift it may sound like it's somewhat insignificant. It has tremendous power for us. So I've seen principals that even start staff meetings to say, all right, let's start naming some of the great successes we've seen and why. Why did they happen? What did we do? That's a simple way to get started. I personally, anytime I meet in a team, we always start in that direction. I've even seen schools, when we think about those 4 layers, when we get to the case consult with a family around a student potentially, they still start with celebrations. And it's a powerful mechanism.
So if you want a powerful next step, and if you're not already doing this, then consider how you can capture those moments of success with your staff, your teams, your people. And then the follow-up to that is, what was something that you did that led to that outcome? Because what we're trying to do is invite people, and Kurtis, I know you and I are broken records, but I'm going to say it anyway. What we're trying to say out loud, Principal Matters listeners, if I'm not being direct enough, I'm just going to say it. Every learning setting is like a good classroom.
Yes.
And your best classroom teachers do this all the time. They set norms. They invite students to examine problems, and they create they provoke a little bit of comfort around a problem.
Yeah, some tension.
Some tension. They seek input. They take a problem and they lean into it until they can see a potential solution. And then they experiment or they assign an action that might lead to the next step that will help you then resolve the issue. And then you rinse and repeat. And the power of that learning cycle for all of us, adults too, is how often are we stopping in our work and reflecting deeply enough to see what's working and what's not working. What action can I take the next time to make it work better? And so just that one tip of celebration with the goal of what led to that success is a reflective practice that brings you back into that cycle of learning that we want in every classroom, but we also have to demonstrate and model too. Kurtis,
I love that, Will.
oh my gosh. I'm trying to figure out how to wrap this up. So I'm going to just ask you, two things. One, how can listeners stay connected with you and your resources? But two, what's a parting word of advice from all of the years you've spent working with schools for that leader who's stepping into a new school year? What's that thing you want them to hold on to?
All right. So the first one, if you go Jigsaw Learning on any platform, we're on the socials, sharing out resources, tips, strategies to help schools. Our website is jigsawlearning.ca. And if you go to jigsawlearning.ca /free, we've got a number of recorded webinars that are there for free that you can learn further in this. I think the parting words, and it took me a long time to figure this out, Will, but it's really central to this collaborative response work, is I think good leaders solve problems. I've seen a number of good leaders. I'd like to think at one point in time, I was a good leader who was trying to solve problems. However, I think there's a next step for this. I know there's leaders listening here who want to help solve problems for the people on their staff. They want to be able to help and support, but I think great leaders create systems to solve problems. And what I mean by that is, how can we create systems and structures so that those closest to the challenges are the ones who are being empowered to act and respond? So I'd suggest for anyone listening as they're coming into that school year, think about, are you solving problems or are you creating systems to solve problems? And I think this is where we want to get to for every leader, is understanding that our children deserve us working in teams. We use the mantra of every child deserves a team, because if we're working as a team, it's going to mean better outcomes for kids, which is what I think our kids deserve.
You know, Kurtis, I'm going to brag on you as we wrap up. I've never been to medical school, but I have been in a teaching hospital before, where, you have a older doctor who will have younger medical students typically with him or her while visiting patients. And they, when our son Jack was hospitalized as an elementary child, it was a teaching hospital, a children's hospital. And I remember the caring physician had a team of younger medical students with him. And as he was talking to Jack and diagnosing him, he would pause and ask them questions. Well, what do you think? And what ideas do you have? Or what do you think should be the next step that we should consider? And if we prescribe this and this happens, and so he was quizzing them. And as I've been listening to you talk today, I've been thinking, like, this feels like a teaching hospital. Like, because Kurtis, you've spent so much time standing alongside teachers and leaders in their learning. And so I just want to commend you, because your work goes really deep for a reason. And it goes deep for a reason because you have been so seeped in the practices of what you just said, of helping schools create the systems to solve problems, not just the person who can solve that problem once and then go on to the next problem. Yeah. And so thank you for being so committed to creating systems that solve problems. And Principal Matters listeners, I want you to reach out. Go online to collaborativeteammeeting.com or look up Jigsaw Learning. You will find a link to Kurtis's new book. I want to encourage you also, if you've got questions, reach out and set up a meeting with Kurtis, because he will gladly answer those questions, go deeper with you, talk to you about some of the opportunities that he could have to visit your school or work with you or your teams. So Kurtis, thank you for the opportunity to bring you back to Principal Matters listeners. And Principal Matters listeners, thank you for your commitment to learning, because what you do matters. And we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.